thing is, we're checking out the deepest thinkers on Reddit. The idea of people being trans just reinforces gender norms. Ultimately, my take would be that you can just do whatever you want, right? I don't really care. Understand this obviously not their intention, however, transitioning from one gender to another implicitly suggests that gender is a fixed binary, a male or female, for example. It's obviously not. Because at best, you can argue that males and females by sex do differ by behavior in general. But also, this is not really an iron rule, because it very rarely how people are, because especially guys might be expected to live up to some kind of masculine ideal. And if you're not that, then your entire claim to your guyness is rejected. So it's not who you are, but prescriptive. Personally, I think it's a win that even if you don't care about it, others get to do what they want. So I wouldn't know if it's right for you, but unless it screws me over, why should I care? The quote by Noam Chomsky comes to mind: the smart way to keep people passive and obedient is strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within the spectrum. Yeah, that's a good point. So what I would like to see, and what I really started with, that, okay, you can just do it. That's it. End of story. So back to the money issue. Like, let's just talk about the money. Let's talk about that. So we live in democracy. I would totally vote for the money of the rich boy. So, and everyone can vote. So why don't we have equality or something? You know, do you not think that people would vote for their self-interest? Because they would. If God was real, I still do not understand why people would worship him. But when I think about it logically, it doesn't add up. I don't see how such God could be considered loving or worthy of devotion. That's because the way God is presented is kinda wrong. I mean, if we just look at fantasy worlds here, then gods are often presented as like just forces, right? You pray to God, so you don't get screwed, or possibly you get some favor. And OG God, well, there are many gods, but God wasn't good. God was just an ultimate power, right? And at that point, because people tend to be drawn to power, then they kind of equated power, ultimate power, as ultimate good. Because man created God, and then have become a slave to their idea of this ultimate power. But of course, there were other gods before, and I would argue that those polytheistic religions were at least more fun, right? They kind of had fun with it. In a way, people looked at God very differently. And you see leftovers of it. I'm just mentioning cultures that I could possibly know, that God were a spirit, that, you know, the god of war is with us, or, you know, the god of fortune is with us. So God essentially was an abstract embodiment of something possibly real. So Japanese could have sayings that, which is kind of hard to say, at least in English, but ki ni naru. So it becomes part of your spirit or something. So and this has the meaning that you kind of worry about it. God is generally not good. And we would really go on a very long detour here. Because if you just look at the dominant Western religion, it is pretty much and very strongly funneling people into servitude. So there you have the people who are, you can argue that within this constraint are hypocrites, and they just dominate, they just take. And then you have the people who like supposed to be obedient, and they're gonna get their reward when they die, and they're supposed to turn the other cheek to those who take and punch, right? So you have someone who is, in a very crude way, they are a loser in life. Not in a way that I'm talking about their character, but in an objective sense. They did not have a good start, and then they were educated to be a certain way. That doesn't really command a high position in a social hierarchy. But they can now pride themselves on their goodness. You know, I might be a peasant who's exploited, but I'm a good person, not like that lord and whatever who's exploiting people. But if you look at that lord, then they also think that they're a good person. Everyone is always a good person. In fact, the more contrary it is to blatant evidence, the more likely they believe that they are good people. But what does good mean? Good, in a most sense, actually means that things you feel toward, and bad would be things you feel against. So the original meaning and the meaning behind the word Satan is adversary. So who is the bad person? Who is not promoting your interest, right? This is not someone who's muhaha hurting people, but some guy who's your rival possibly, or just not really doing you a solid. And then you could read stories where I'm not sure how should I describe it, but like possibly noobish writers or whatever you can call it, whatever really. You have a story of some hero who goes on a journey and they are the good guy, right? Although in their mind they're entirely good, but from the perspective of others they are kind of bad. They have their justifications, their rationalizations. They get the stuff, and get things done. And from the perspective of others, they are just a total psychopath on a murder spree, then a looting spree, right? So ultimately, it raises the question, good for who? Because very often, the answer is that either the outcome is lopsided when it comes to rewards or entirely one-sided. And those who do such things maybe have various beliefs, it doesn't matter. But if you offer them the opposite deal, truly, they would not take it, right? As a very simple example, you can think about it as like they are the one who cut the cake and also picked the piece, right? Or possibly even cut the other guy. But because they can cut and take, they do it as selfishly as they can. Or possibly just take the whole thing and say like, what cake? But it doesn't have to be God. I mean, you bring up God here, but people worship other people who are kind of like deemed to be powerful, but it's honestly just a culture make-believe, because that's it. Imagine if everyone just forgot everything, right? Then what stuff do you have? And like, the king, like, why are you wearing that stupid hat? It's just all nonsense. Everything is just nonsense. But as long as you believe that they are king, then you kind of treat them as like pseudo-god. You're gonna suck up to them at least, or at least try to not incur their wrath. And there are gonna be people who are less invested in trying to keep up this shared make-believe, and others are gonna be more invested in keeping up this shared make-believe because they have it good. And that is eventually, and that is what usually see, that people promote the system that promotes their interest. But if it turned against them, then they wouldn't promote it. Essentially, I like it because I have it good. And interestingly, if you have a system that is fundamentally unequal, then that is always bad for the majority. I'll bet you might argue that it could be a small scale exploitation. You might have like 30% of the population as slaves and everyone else gets a cut. Children shouldn't go to church or be exposed to extremist culture. Yeah, but you can say this, but the parents are still gonna teach the kids right. I know what you mean. People have good intentions. Yeah, again, we can replace good for selfish. Because it brings the question, good for who? Suppose I have a kid and teach them to obey me. Teach them to believe what I want them to believe. Is it good for the kid or is it good for me? But it's very damaging to tell children that their ultimate parent who loves them will also torture them forever after they die if they don't think all of the exact right things. Yeah, but cultures do this a lot. Arguably, people mainly had kids throughout history just to have them as a workforce. Yeah, sure, there is more to it than that, but still doesn't change the fact that that is kind of the main expectation toward them. The Americans have tolerated inaction and indifference in our politics and government far too long. The current crisis is our reward. It doesn't matter, right? Because the owners own the media, And the regular person does not even possibly have the vocabulary to know how screwed they are. They don't know anything. If you just talk to a regular person, they don't know anything. And people might get mad at like, oh my god, those workers so stupid. And maybe yes. But also, you gotta look at them as kind of a victim of that. Because if you saw some slave defending their master and repeating whatever propaganda they were told, then you might dislike them for that. But it's important to look at the bigger picture and wonder that, are you actually serving your interest? And this could be true for some, because they are essentially positioned higher in the dominance hierarchy. And they don't have it that good as their masters, but they could be the managers, you know? You keep the peasants in line, keep them from getting to me, and you got to have an okay life, right? Essentially, they are the guys holding the whip. And they are incentivized to, because they don't want to be the guy who's not holding the whip, and it's unlikely they're going to have a better position. Now, this detour might seem random, but based on what schools you go to and how you're educated, what you learn is different. So if you go to more elite establishments, and possibly, of course, you read the right books, then the idea is going to be different. It's going to be like, win at all cost. While for most, from what I'm seeing, the pervasive idea is that you're bent over, right? You just need to follow and obey. And also, you need to be stupid too. The common things out there are kind of serving to make you stupid and kind of destroy your spirit. Or at very least not cherish it. And it's hard to emphasize the importance of this. That if you continuously do that to people, then it really hurts their kind of willpower. Because how would you make a slave, right? Because on the first day, they would be defiant as fuck, right? But give it time, and eventually they'll be depressed and helpless, and possibly they even really struggle to find the willpower, the courage to read a self-help book, and definitely can't act on that. They are destroyed. Even if you could let them free, they can be. At least not right away. The ingrained propaganda of our greatness weakened our country to its core. The core has been the illusion of power of individual liberty, because we never really saw ourselves as a collective citizenry. But if it's all about the individual being great, and just get the money of those who just being dicks, literally, right? Just vote for your self-interest, and that's it. But also, I'm not sure this is true. This is, okay, I think this guy possibly is talking about current matters, but America used to have 40 strong unions. It was kind of threatening the country too. That's why they were broken apart. Now, it's unlikely you're gonna see unions, and partly, and foreigners are preferred for many reasons, but one of the reasons would be that you have a workforce that is more divided. And that's why you would want everyone just to argue about politics too, and all the bullshit, right? You can't have a union if everyone is just fighting each other. And you can't have a rebellion and a mutual cause if you think like you're divided by people by all the other bullshit, instead of like, I don't have the money, you don't have the money either, but that guy does. So how about we do something about that? Too many of you couldn't be bothered to vote, and I'm afraid the same is about to happen to Canada. It doesn't matter though. Okay, you can argue that it matters a little bit, but suppose, can you vote on what you want? Because you can't. You see, in almost all countries, if you're lucky, in some countries only one, but in most countries, two different puppets who serve the same interest, right? What do you want? Bend over to business boys 99% or only 97%? Because that's pretty much it. You cannot ever vote on things that really in your interest, because let's just say that you could vote on anything, right? You don't vote on puppets, like you get to vote on some puppet. No. You vote on your interest. Would a unemployed homeless man vote for the money of Elon Musk? Would they vote for some kind of UBI? Would they go for something that really promotes the people? Because the truth is this. money is your vote. And money is essentially your freedom. And money is your power. So yeah, the regular citizen might be like, oh my god, yes, I'm gonna spend like, possibly hours of my day just to vote. Possibly that's gonna matter. Man, possibly gonna spend hundreds of hours per year just to get educated. And if you didn't do this whole thing, you would be farther ahead. Maybe one thing you could have done, although this is almost certainly not a viable option, is just to buy the media, just try to get any part of the media and just broadcast propaganda or, ideas that favor you. Because you voting for the less bad puppet is, I guess it's something. But mainly this bullshit exists to give an illusion of control to the people. Because if you had a dictator, then there would be no confusion about the game you're playing. But in many countries, you might have only one guy, or maybe you have two guys. And now you feel like you are free. You are in control. You can vote for what I want. Constant stimulation is replacing boredom, but boredom once fueled creativity, deep thinking, and self-reflection, making it an essential part of the human experience. Also, our culture very much fuels people into either being distracted or productive. And it's not really rewarding. It's not really rewarding for most people to try to figure things out because most people are not going to make it. You can have a guy who will be a complete total loser throughout their life trying to figure things out and they will not make any progress. But it would be our incentive as a society to have a bunch of guys like that. Personally speaking, one aspect that I'm going to mention is that I'm getting a little bored, and I'm not sure is that going to be a culture thing, about the common distractions out there. And arguably, I wasn't really that into it in the first place. Simply said, the common distractions are just too stupid. But almost certainly you can find something for yourself that's going to be distracting till you just fall over. So if I'm targeted by the algorithm, I'm almost certainly caught. But if I just look at common things that they're kind of targeting most people with, it just looks a little dumb to me. Many Christians don't even know the history of the Bible and religion as a whole. Grew up in a religious household, the lack of understanding for people who went to Bible colleges are real. Yeah. Christianity is not exactly known for knowing stuff and questioning stuff. You guys might not know this about me, because I was kind of brought up as a Christian too. But I was more questioning than most. And let me just say that was not popular. But my perspective would be, I don't think most Christians are like die-hard Christians. This is just their kind of like shared culture, or maybe like a, hey, just don't be a dick to each other. I'm not elevating Christianity here at all. And I'm totally agreeing with this guy that they don't really know anything about it. And that is kind of a good thing. Because in a way, it's kind of possibly, I can't really generalize, especially globally, but in many contexts, it's kind of taken over by culturally Christian or something. So they don't really believe in God. They don't really go to church. They don't really pray. But they just think that not being a dick to others is a good idea. Even though those who possibly do that are okay too, and possibly welcome. And ironically, those who are like die-hard Christians either might have to find their own groups, or maybe the non-die-hard Christians get expelled and essentially sent away from the die-hard groups. It's kind of really hard to say here. I guess what I'm saying is that my perception of religion would be, in the modern age, is that many are not really true believers. They don't care about the book. They don't care about, well, you can argue that this was a thing for a long time, since the beginning. They're not true believers. Yep, I think a lot of Christians don't read at all. They only read the passages their pastors and priests tell them to read and ignore the rest. It's too bad. It's an interesting book. Is it? Even if you don't believe in its religious assertions, a fascinating document from the Bronze Age. I feel like conversations don't flow the way they used to. There's a detachment, like people are too drained to fully engage or linger on a thought for too long, where they used to be curiosity and discourse. now it's mostly passive reactions and recycled dialogue. It's hard to say. I cannot make such generalization, but I did notice possibly one thing. I could be just crazy, but I'm just gonna say it. I think more people care about winning in a conversation. My perception that at least in the past, they cared more about, not necessarily about inquisitive exploration of truth or something, but at least being civil, possibly positive. Of course, this really depends on the circumstance. But in our current day and age, you might see the politicians act like total dicks. And I actually had an interaction with a person who were basically trying to be some kind of mini Trump or something. Essentially, they become some kind of an inspiration, or at least they normalize that kind of behavior. And you might even go on YouTube and you see a bunch of people like just arguing, like, who won the debate? It's like, was it a debate? It should not be a debate. It should be just a mutual discourse, trying to find, maybe not even find, just trying to learn, right? But also many times, there's really not much point to a debate or just talking. Like, okay, you don't know that, I don't know that, but possibly I know that, but like, let's just learn, right? Let's just open up Google on my phone and let's just see the information. I could be this person, and let me tell you, if you do this, the other person will look at you like they fucking want to stab you. Of course, depends on the person. No matter who I'm talking to, it feels like I'm talking to the same person. Not that I'm much better. This is very interesting, and that's a very good point. That people in the past, I'm not saying that they were smarter by any means, but because of the internet, you would hear people, and know that media, and although you can even argue that even in the past people are more likely to bring up the news, but I would argue that over time, people are more likely to talk about the same things. Of course, it depends on the person, but suppose they like social media and they like the TV and they even go on YouTube or something, it is very likely that they're gonna keep thinking and keep talking about the same things. And the saddest part, although they're probably at least wasting their time with this bullshit, but the saddest part is that they probably take some kind of camp that they make part of their identity. And now they are heavily invested in it. They see a discussion like they have their side and you have your side. And they are just gonna win against you and feel validated. And you don't care. If you could, in your life, the best move would be just to walk away immediately. Hurt from past relationships turns people almost psychopathic in their approach to dating. Really? I think the game we are playing incentivizes and rewards a certain kind of behavior. And if you're not that kind of person, it might be a little rough. That's kind of a sad part, because if you see life as winners and losers, then what else you can do? Then try to be the winner, right? You are in an arena, and either you win or either you lose. So, which one will it be? Hurt people. But also, those who can take will often justify it. But if the tides turn, then suddenly they are not as a fan of such system. Teens are naive and inexperienced, but our education system only turns them into slaves, depriving them their ability to think deeply and philosophically. Again, it kind of depends on which schools you go to. And I recall seeing at least one video where they kind of showed some kind of elite school. Again, I already brought up this point that based on how well off you are, you're kind of taught different things. And depending on which school you go to, kind of taught different things. You might be taught critical thinking and winning and exploit people, and that makes you superior and a good person. While most would be taught getting a job and bending over. And I guess not even much. People don't really necessarily have the vocabulary to express and realize how screwed they are. And suppose they even do, they might just try to do things that will obviously not work. Asking will not work. If asking did the job, you would have already received. Naturally, the master taught the slave and used the slave, but only waiting for the slave to ask very kindly. It's like, oh, of course, I do you a solid, mate. Most people never had the ability to think deeply and philosophically. Certainly, the state of education system isn't helping, but teach critical thinking in schools isn't a panacea people think it is. The dumb kids just won't pay attention in critical thinking class. Right. So we are kind of back to calling the kids dumb. But one aspect that you also need to consider that schools are not neutral. Even if we don't argue that they are full-on indoctrination camps, which some might, at very least they're not gonna rock the boat and act against the interest of the country. So in many areas, you don't need much critical thinking. You just need to not believe in things. So like, okay, we have democracy, so yeah, I'm just gonna vote my interest, my self-interest to the max, right? We're gonna have equality. Let's go. Because everyone votes their self-interest to the max, so there you go. But of course, you can't have that. So that's not an option, and you gotta teach people that is not an option. Or most likely, not even mention it. You want them to be slaves. Who else is going to work 9 to 5 for paper food tokens? If they weren't slaves, society would cease to exist. Real intellectuals figure it out. And that is the rub. You need to teach them to be slaves. And to be stupid. No doubt they are ignorant. But we're not gonna fix that. In fact, you need to believe the right things. Like God or something. And all the other good beliefs. The world order is collapsing to make way for AI. AI and robotic automation, I guess the Metal Man, is certainly going to be disruptive. And it's going to shake up the world order. The big difference, there are going to be many differences, but one aspect that we had up to this point is that people were fairly eager to exploit third world countries. But possibly we're going to get to the point, although jobs are kind of outsourced there currently, so that's kind of possibly good for them, if you call it that. But if AI can do the job, and robots can do the job, then I guess good luck. So you're going to have, like, I don't know how many people, at most millions, who possibly have any ownership of AI and robots, and everyone else, good luck. The ultra-wealthy will never allow AI to fix or improve humanity because they would lose their purpose power. That's a good point. You need perpetual scarcity. Because the food paper tokens that we talked about only have value because people don't have it, right? People don't have. So, for example, I had like a farm. How do I get people to work on my farm? Like, even like the legitimacy of my farm is in question because like I called some dibs on dirt, so whatever. But let's say that others don't care because they have their farm too. It's like, oh my god, you should work on mine. So I gotta take that shit. So like, okay, I have it. But now what? Let's say that they don't need my stuff. It's like, oh my god, they're still not working for me. So you not only have to chase off the peasants from their land, but now the only way to live and only gaming time is you, right? They need you. If they had their house, they had their everything, they don't give a shit. And your imaginary money that you just printed it, and like you put like your 10 on it, it's completely pointless. It's worthless. Like it always was. And if you argue that it's such a great system, then sure, I'll be the guy who owns everything and just prints like pieces of paper with numbers on them, and you'll be the guy holding your dick. Is it a good system? The only way it works because you need to teach people into it, essentially, and also enforce it via violence. And of course, you're going to have some people who are going to rise up and they're going to be closer to power, essentially. They will use it to create even more scarcity. They will replace every possible job with AI, creating a new wave of poverty. The few remaining jobs will be highly sought after and highly competitive. One aspect that people not really talking about, that if robot takes over violence, the very key takeaway. Because you could have some kind of rebellion right now, and possibly the humans are going to join or not join, or, you know, whatever. It can go either way. But imagine that we live in a world like, this is like 2050, and Elon Musk has the biggest army on Earth. Bigger than everyone else combined. If you want to rise up against Elon Musk, you can't. He owns so much, and it's only always backed by violence. Because what if people say no? Because you can educate them that, this is my stuff. It's like, okay, what if they don't agree? Then it's going to be violence, nothing else. And at that point, we can be in a world where you don't even care that much about education. You definitely don't care about people having kids. And maybe he's going to live forever too. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting. Anyway, few remaining jobs will be highly sought after and highly competitive. The vast majority of people will live as peasants. Maybe not. I don't think they will live. Because currently, what can you do if you're poor? Like, certainly, people don't care right now, even though it's already happening. It's already happened that AI is just taking away jobs, and did they get replaced? And the obvious answer is no. No one cares that people lost their jobs right now. Because they either benefited or they did not lose their jobs currently, even though you were affected. Even if you were kind of fine, so far, you're not really considering that those people who lost their jobs are kind of not really, well, first of all, they're having a bad time, but you might not care about that, but possibly they are not really contributing to the society that much. They also can't even buy stuff, right? So suppose we have like a housing crisis or whatever that is. But if people had the money, right? If people had the means, then they would be like, oh yeah, wouldn't that mean that people are just really interested in buying houses, right? Just make all the houses, right? If people were just well off, like, okay, just buy a house, right? But people can't do that. And people who don't have the jobs actually can't do that either. So, not that I'm a fan of jobs here as the only way to live. That really should be irrespective of that. So, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do other than try to get a piece of the AI/robot pot. Because if you don't get a piece of that, you will be gone. And you're just like hoping that your government can put pressure on businesses. But they might not even care. Because they don't need your work. They don't need you at all. And you might say like, oh yeah, okay, fine. Then we're just going to work anyway. It doesn't matter. Because the robots undercut you. Most will fail and be forced to live in absolute poverty or die. It will create a whole new level of poverty and reshape the world as we know it. Unless we have strong enough social services and safety nets in place that are designed to help people without jobs, I find it unlikely that they will waste money on such things. We're already seeing them try to tear those things apart. Yeah. And let me suppose that you have it good right now, right? But there's going to be a lot of desperate people who will not. And you might have money right now, but that not necessarily will matter. Because you don't have power. Capitalism is a monster. Basically, this guy talks with AI about capitalism. And when you look at it as a system that meant to promote humans, it never makes sense, right? It's never even good for the team. It could be only good for a certain people who happen to own the capital. Ask it about bloody revolution commonalities. All oppression eventually leads there. This country is a fast-swelling powder keg full of more firearms than people. We're talking about a very short list to squash it. The way we define capitalism promotes psychopaths. If only that was it. Because I don't like that mindset though. That you have this small group of people, the psychopaths, who do the bad thing and everyone else is just fine. Oh, please. Psychopaths would most likely not care. While most people who have it good effectively pride themselves on having a lot of blood on their hands. I have 50 slaves and killed thousands of people. People don't talk like this, only do. And they essentially brag about it, right? This is status. I have it good because of my good character, and others have it bad because of their bad character. That's just how it works. Anyway, people are basically serfs now. Work hard, own nothing unless your parents did. But technically, you might be able to get a good job, but even that is pretty limited. Because imagine that even good jobs could pay like, and in a European context, if they paid 6 figures, that would be amazing. But in order to have that, suppose you had 7 figures, just money, possibly investments, then you make more money easily, no doubt, without question, than even the best workers. What is my point here? Jobs are always for slaves, right? If you had like even a few million, then you are amazing. That's it. You're an escape velocity compared to most people. If you had like 10 million, You put some in like Bitcoin or something, other like S&P 500. You're making millions easily per year. And who's going to make that much money? No one. So the point is, they cannot ever catch up. They're only getting behind. Some are getting more behind, others are getting less behind. It doesn't matter. Everyone is getting behind. So it's never about earning money, but owning stuff. And anyone with 2 coconuts, or they figured this out while they were in elementary school at like 8-year-old or something. And possibly non-job endeavors or luck, pure luck, might make you part of the new elite. Or the elite. And that's it. Everything we need to know about capitalism is encapsulated in its very name. It centers on and pride as a capital. But also, it doesn't make too much sense. Like, let's just look at like knowledge. Like, does it make sense to capitalize on knowledge? No, it makes sense to share it. The more you share knowledge, the better it is for you too, and for others. But under capitalism, my incentive is to hide and not share my knowledge, but try to capitalize on it. If I can make 100,000 myself while costing humanity trillions, that's a good deal for me. If I just shared it and humanity gained trillions, but suppose I gain nothing, in this case, that's a bad deal. I should not do that. Extremism is normal now. People make extreme rather than modest inferences about the world as a form of recreation. I don't think they actually believe in their ideas because they do not act as if they are true. I see extremist posts every day on Reddit. I think about a calmer way of life that is not on display anymore. It surely exists somewhere. Ma does not engagement in media. That's pretty much it. That's a good point. Also, you can experience this yourself. Taking their side is great. Taking the opposite side is like big fisticuffs. That's a good fight. But not caring is possibly the worst thing ever. In many cases, people would rather have you as a rival than someone who just completely invalidates their entire game. So just to circle back to a topic that was brought up earlier, and just to make it super obvious here, that's why I'm using it. Let's say religion and God. You can believe in God, you can not believe in God. But if you said that you don't give a shit about any of this, God dumb bullshit. And if you like it, I got some magic beans to sell you. The term atheist doesn't make sense. That only in relation to already believing in God. It makes no sense. This too shall pass. But no, that would be wrong. You should spend your life believing and thinking about, at least, what the media, what others want you to think about. And you should fight about it. And not things that really matter, but things that really don't. And keep in mind, no nuance takes allowed. You have to pick a side and fight the other side. And know that you're right.